konnichiwa. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Society of American Music's Digital Lectures in American Music. I'm Dr. Shelina Brown, Assistant Professor of Musicology at the University of Cincinnati's College Conservatory of Music, and I'm excited to share a glimpse of my research that reimagines the cultural legacy of Yoko Ono. Although Yoko Ono's influence in the art world has long been celebrated, my research turns our ears to a different frequency, one where Ono's musical innovations take center stage. Reflecting on her experience of growing up between Japan and the West, Yoko Ono once described herself with wry humor as a grapefruit, not quite an orange and not quite a lemon, but something in between, a bittersweet hybrid. Her first publication, a 1964 collection of short conceptual art poems, thus takes grapefruit as its title. Born in 1933, Yoko Ono spent her childhood between Japan and the U.S. as the daughter of a successful international banker. During World War II, her family was split, her father exiled to Southeast Asia, while she and her mother and siblings endured the war exiled in the Japanese countryside. Educated at prestigious colleges in both Japan and the U.S., Ono has described her life as one of in-betweenness, marked by cultural dislocation, but also by a deeply felt global awareness. A vocal advocate for peace and justice, she has used both her art and her voice to protest war and oppression throughout her career. Biographers and journalists have framed Yoko Ono in various ways, often centering her relationship with Beatle John Lennon, while art historians focus on her successful conceptual art career in the mid-century New York avant-garde and beyond. But for me, a former punk rocker turned professor, I'm drawn to Yoko Ono's music, and in particular, her scream. In 1969, Yoko Ono unleashed an earth-shattering series of vocalizations that changed the soundscape of rock music forever. But don't plug your ears just yet. I will give you a heads up before I play this scream for you. First, I want you to imagine a time in your life when you felt like you just had to scream. In that moment, what did you do? Did you stifle the urge to avoid alarming innocent bystanders? Can you imagine in that moment, stepping onto a stage, staring down 25,000 people no less, and letting it all out? No holding back, no filter, just pure, raw emotion, unleashed in a series of gut-wrenching screams? Well, Yoko Ono did just that at the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival Festival in 1969. I'll share some surviving recorded footage of that momentous occasion a little bit later in this presentation. But for now, I want you to take a listen to the studio recording of her iconic scream on the track Don't Worry Kyoko, a song of sorrow and rage over the kidnapping of her daughter Kyoko, featured on Ono's 1969 album Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band. In the studio version, you can really hear the nuances of her fearless extended scream, a sonic rebellion that was unlike anything that had been heard before in the genre of rock. It went something like this. For most of her career, Yoko Ono has wielded her voice as an instrument of protest. Her iconic extended screams, often met with derision and ridicule by mainstream audiences, have also been embraced by underground, punk, and avant-garde artists as a subversive and innovative form of artistic expression. While Ono's musical output spans diverse genres, from noise rock to pop ballads to new wave dance tracks, her scream remains one of the most enduring and influential aspects of her work in global rock history. Far from being mere outbursts, however, as you can hear, Ono's screams are aesthetically crafted improvisations that communicate a spectrum of emotions that come from deep within the body: rage, excitement, arousal, frustration, sorrow, and loss. Prior to meeting John Lennon, and entering the world of the rock and roll counterculture. Yoko Ono was one of the few Asian women active in New York's avant-garde Fluxus performance art scene. Long before avant-garde vocalists Kathy Berberian and Meredith Monk, Ono began experimenting with her voice in a variety of art spaces, even alongside free jazz artists like Ornette Coleman. In these spaces, it was rare, if not radical, to hear a woman making unconventional sounds, as women were expected to conform to pleasing vocal aesthetics. And it was even more striking to hear an Asian woman break these norms. Yoko Ono was keenly aware of the performative power of her voice as a Japanese woman, and deliberately used it to challenge stereotypes of the model minority, a concept that points to the ways in which Asian and Asian American people are perceived as subservient and silenced by dominant white U.S. culture. Yoko Ono rose to prominence as an artist in the post-World War II era, as Japan reeled from the trauma of the atomic bombings and U.S. occupation, as Japanese Americans grappled with the scars of internment, and as the U.S. escalated war in Vietnam. In this time period, Ono's visceral screams carried profound political weight. Her raw vocalizations disrupted the harmful trope of the model minority and reclaimed sonic space on her own terms. Although Yoko Ono was not directly involved in the burgeoning Asian American movement, it is significant that her iconic scream from 1969 emerged against a cultural backdrop of rising Asian American and Asian American feminist consciousness in the U.S. Grassroots organizers like Yuri Kochiyama forged alliances with the Black Panther Party, while activists Kazu Iijima and Shizu Matsuda founded Asian Americans for Action, also known as AAA, advocating for an end to the Vietnam War and redress for the injustices faced by Asian communities in the U.S. In 1972, Ono notably invited the Asian American activist musical duo Yellow Pearl to perform on the nationally broadcast Mike Douglas Show, offering public support and a rare mainstream platform. Nobuko Miyamoto's vocals on We Are the Children voiced a bold, feminist Asian American perspective, one that had seldom been heard by the broader U.S. public at the time. A half-century later, Ono continues to raise her voice in defiance. In 2016, she released a poignant scream into the world that quickly went viral, a visceral response to the presidential election, which not only marked the defeat of Hillary Clinton, the would-be first woman president, but also ushered in the conservative Trump era of feminist backlash. Are you ready to hear her scream? Here it goes. Now, you might be wondering, what in particular makes Ono's scream so radical? How does it defy classic rock conventions? And why does it matter? I propose two key responses to this line of questioning. First, the Japanese stylistic influence of Ono's voice fundamentally reshaped the parameters of rock music. And second, her vocal expression emerged as a powerful form of feminist cultural resistance. Yoko Ono's unconventional vocal style disrupted expectations of what a rock voice could be, expanding the genre's musical vocabulary. Resisting the pressure to suppress her accent, Ono embraced her Japanese voice, even drawing on traditional Japanese vocal styles. Trained by her mother in childhood, she was exposed to nagauta, a classical genre linked to both kabuki and no theater as well as chamber music. Also enka, a hybrid style blending traditional Japanese singing with Western pop. Her vocalizations brought a distinctly Japanese inflection into rock, introducing timbres and techniques previously unheard in the genre. Let's listen to examples of both Nagauta and the westernized Enka style. This piece, Atsumori no Saigo, or The Death of Atsumori, is a well-known example of heikyoku, a style related to Nagauta. It tells one of the most famous battle stories from the medieval epic, The Tale of Heike. This piece is performed by vocalist Handa Junko, who virtuosically accompanies herself on a lute known as a biwa.
と思いて後ろをきっと見ければ問いかじわらごじきばかりで続いたり
Throughout the 20th century, with the rise of the popular music industry in Japan, traditional vocal styles were increasingly blended with a Western orchestral pop production, giving rise to the genre of enka. This would have been the music Yoko Ono and her family listened to on the radio in Japan growing up. Here's an example of an upbeat enka tune recorded by Shimakura Chiyoko in the late 1950s.
久しぶりに手を引いて親子で歩ける嬉しさに小さい頃が浮かんできますよ
In 1969, the same year that Ono released Don't Worry Kyoko, the new hip genre of urban enka took off, spearheaded by one of Japan's first pop idols, Keiko Fuji, known for her rough vibrato paired with a swinging 60s visual aesthetic.
バカだなバカだな騙されちゃって夜が冷たい新宿の女
Influenced by Japanese music, Ono's rock and roll vocalizations took on a rebellious edge, becoming vessels for personal and historical trauma. Though born into privilege, she endured displacement during the Pacific War and defied cultural and familial expectations as a woman artist in both Japan and the US. Marked by gendered and racial trauma, she was often treated as an outsider in what she called the boys' club of the New York avant-garde, and later faced intense public scrutiny over her interracial marriage to John Lennon. After suffering a miscarriage in the late 1960s, Ono and Lennon turned to primal scream therapy. But for Ono, these screams extended beyond personal anguish. Her voice became a sonic expression of intergenerational female trauma. In tracks like Don't Worry Kyoko, she gives voice to a rarely acknowledged pain in rock, the raw grief of miscarriage intertwined with the forced separation from her daughter Kyoko, who was kidnapped by her ex-husband Anthony Cox. Upon her live performance at the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival Festival, Yoko Ono's screams in Don't Worry Kyoko sent shockwaves through the audience, leaving many struggling to process what they were hearing. Let's watch the footage. This performance really put Yoko Ono on the map. Within mainstream rock media, however, Ono was misunderstood and vilified, labeled as an unruly woman with an even unrulier voice, and unfairly blamed for breaking up the Beatles. However, rebellious underground musicians and artists were drawn to her fearless vocal defiance, and she was eagerly embraced by the rising punk rock movement of the late 1970s and beyond. Just as significant, her unapologetic embrace of her Japanese identity helped open doors for Asian women in rock and punk. Here's a collage of some key artists indebted to Ono's vocal innovations: the B-52s, Public Image Limited, L7, Nina Hagen, Lena Lovitch, Diamanda Galas, Sonic Youth, and Mitski, to name but a few. By the 1990s, Ono was seen as a veritable icon within underground music scenes. Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth considers himself a disciple, anointing Ono the Queen of Noise in his 1995 homage track, Ono Soul. The release of Rising in 1995 marked a turning point for Ono. Encouraged by her son Sean Lennon, who was by then enmeshed in the Brooklyn underground, she returned to the studio. Featuring raw, uncompromising vocals, the anti-war album resonated with a new generation of youth who were actively speaking out against the rise of the Gulf War and U.S. militarization in the neoliberal era. Here is a sample of War Zone, a track from Rising, accompanied by Ono's own animated visuals. A content warning may be appropriate here, as the piece includes unsettling elements, gunshots, spectral wails, and Ono's howling improvised vocalizations. Rising is especially notable for marking a return to Ono's rebellious vocal experimentation, now refracted through the voice of a woman in her 60s. Her unapologetic embrace of her aging voice adds a powerful dimension to her legacy, reminding us that boundary-pushing artistry is not confined by age. Once vilified by the media, who devalued her solo musical endeavors, with Rising, Ono began her shift into the popular mainstream as public attitudes evolved with the millennial generation. The dance chart-topping remix album, Yes, I'm a Witch, featuring collaborations with cutting-edge electronic artists, cemented Ono's influence. She followed with Take Me to the Land of Hell in 2013, which included the unexpected chart-topping single Bad Dancer, marking her emergence as an octogenarian dance icon. A string of notable collaborations and performances led to the 50th anniversary reissue of Plastic Ono Band and the 2022 tribute album Ocean Child, featuring both rock legends and rising Asian American artists. Meanwhile, Peter Jackson's Get Back fueled newfound appreciation, with New York Times critic Amanda Hess positioning Ono as the captivating star of the show. Yoko Ono is now emerging as a legacy artist for a new era, a shift that coincides with a post-2020 surge in Asian American activism and visibility. In the wake of rising anti-Asian sentiment during the pandemic, movements like #StopAsianHate, #NotYourModelMinority, and projects like the Asian American Antibody Zine, a digital collaboration by key Asian American feminists spearheaded by Selani Bahman and Rachel Kuo, have brought Asian American rights to the forefront. Amid this cultural reckoning, Ono's catalog is being revived through re-releases, critical reassessments, and high-profile tributes. Yoko Ono's widespread acceptance as a musician at the front of rock leads to considerations of rewriting rock history. How does including women of color in rock history challenge its dominant narratives? Classic rock has long been idealized as timeless, yet its perception remains overwhelmingly white and male. As more women and women of color gain recognition, the genre must be reconfigured through a more diverse lens. The current surge of interest in overlooked pioneers signals a shift towards highlighting the influence of Asian and Asian American women who helped shape rock's sound. What if the origins of rock history could be traced back to the virtuosic arrangements of the Tokyo Happy Coats?
Won't you come home, Bill beat it, won't you come home? She moans all day long. I did the cooking, honey, I paid the rent. I do it, daddy.
We could then move to consider 70s rockers Fanny, featuring the Filipino-American Millington sisters who took LA's troubadour scene by storm. And we can't forget the iconic trio Shonen Knife, who famously revived Ramones-style punk rock from a Japanese woman's perspective.
I like green tea, cookie, 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 cookie.
In the 1990s, Emily's Sassy Lime was a key Riot Girl band that promoted intersectional feminist punk politics. Frequent collaborators and supporters of Ono's work, Chibo Mato brought a Japanese twist to Brooklyn hipster electronica. The millennial generation boasts virtuosic singer-songwriter Mitski, who brings a fresh Asian American feminist perspective to the sad girl movement. And of course, there are the current teen punk rockers, the Linda Lindas, who have brought back the Riot Girl energy for a whole new generation.
This is no resolution, this is a revolution. You and me, we're just playing the long game, not on a battlefield.
Rewriting rock history is not a solo act. It's a collective call to listen differently, to amplify the unheard and the misunderstood, and to make space for voices that have always been present, simply waiting to be recognized. Ono's enduring significance reminds us of the urgent need to rethink whose stories we tell, whose voices we value, and how we shape the narratives that define our cultural memory. I hope this digital lecture has given you a different picture of rock history, one that shows that when it comes to screaming for justice and visibility, Yoko Ono was always ahead of the mic.